The Valorian Imperial fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Sol system with all the confidence of a predator that had never known defeat. 300 warships materialized in perfect formation, their dark purple hulls gleaming under the light of the yellow star that humans had once called Sunday. Admiral Keshtar stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Time's Eternal Dominion Asterisk, with his 4 arms clasped behind his broad back. His silver eyes studied the tactical display with satisfaction. "Another primitive system falls to the Empire," he said to his second-in-command, Commander Rin. "Make note in the logs. This is our 48th conquest." Rin's scales shifted to a pleased shade of green. "Scanners are detecting 9 planets, Admiral. The 3rd and 4th planets show signs of previous habitation. Structural remains. Cities. But..." She paused, her head crest flattening in confusion. "No life signs. No active technology. No response to our hails." Keshtar's mood darkened. "They fled? Cowards." He walked closer to the display, studying the blue-green planet that orbited in what his science officers called the habitable zone. "How long ago?" "Analyzing atmospheric composition and structural decay patterns," Rin said, working her console with practiced efficiency. "Estimate: 700 to 800 standard cycles." "Admiral, this system was abandoned long ago." The Admiral's jaw clenched. A conquest meant nothing if there was no one left to conquer. No subjects to rule. No resources being actively used. Just empty planets and the ghosts of a civilization that had chosen flight over fight. Still, there might be salvage. Technology. Historical data that could prove valuable. "Send survey teams to the 3rd planet," Keshtar ordered, "and scan the entire system. If these humans built cities, they built ships. I want to know where they went and what they left behind." For 3 days, the Valorian fleet picked through the bones of humanity's cradle. They found ruins on Earth, Mars, and several moons. They found old satellites, their orbits decaying, their power cells long dead. They found automated defense platforms that had run out of fuel centuries ago. Everything told the same story. Humanity had packed up and left in a massive evacuation, taking everything they could carry. The science teams presented their findings to Admiral Keshtar in his private quarters. The lead researcher, a thin Valorian named Dr. Thex, spread holographic images across the table. "The humans were more advanced than we initially thought," Thex explained. "They had achieved faster-than-light travel, artificial gravity, and fusion power. But they never developed neural-linked AI systems like ours. Everything was manual control. Physical switches and buttons." He said this last part with obvious disdain. "Primitive? Really? Why did they leave?" Keshtar asked. Thex pulled up an image of Earth's sun. Their star was dying. Not dramatically, but enough that they knew they had perhaps 2,000 cycles before it became uninhabitable. Rather than fight the inevitable, they chose to leave. Mass evacuation. "We estimate over 9 billion individuals departed this system." Keshtar drummed his fingers on the table. 9 billion refugees. Scattered among the stars. They could be anywhere. What about their military? Surely they had warships. "We found evidence of a modest defense fleet," Thex continued. "Most ships appear to have been converted for the evacuation. Cargo haulers, colony ships, generation vessels. However..." He paused, pulling up a new image. "Yesterday, Survey Team 7 found something interesting in the asteroid belt between the 4th and 5th planets. The hologram showed a massive structure, a space dock built into a hollowed-out asteroid. It was old, clearly abandoned, with hull breaches and dead sensor arrays, but inside the dock, held in place by ancient magnetic clamps, was a ship. It was not beautiful by Valorian standards. Where Imperial vessels were sleek and curved, this ship was angular and brutal. It looked like someone had taken geometric shapes and welded them together with pure function in mind. The hull was dark, gray, pockmarked with micrometeor impacts. Its surface bristled with weapons turrets, dozens of them. The ship was roughly 400 meters long, shaped like a flattened wedge with oversized engine nacelles at the rear. "What is it?" Keshtar asked, leaning forward with interest. "We're not entirely sure," Thex admitted. "The dock's computer systems are mostly destroyed, but we recovered fragments of data. The ship is designated Terran Prototype Fury. Based on what little we could translate, it was some kind of experimental warship, built during a period the humans called the Desperation Era, when they first realized their sun was dying and were considering other options." "Other options?" "War, Admiral. Before they chose to evacuate, there was apparently a faction that wanted to invade a neighboring system and take it by force. This ship was built for that purpose." Thex pulled up technical schematics, though they were incomplete. It was never deployed. According to the logs, it was deemed too unstable for service and abandoned when the peaceful evacuation plan was adopted. Keshtar studied the image of the Times Fury asterisk. Despite its primitive appearance, there was something about it that stirred his warrior's instincts. It looked dangerous, like a weapon left loaded. "Can it be salvaged?" he asked. "The hull is intact. The reactor appears to be offline but undamaged. Some weapon systems are still physically attached. With our technology, we should be able to tow it back to the fleet. As for making it operational," Thex shrugged, "that would take time and resources. But as a trophy? As a museum piece showing humanity's failed military ambitions? It would be quite valuable." A slow smile spread across Admiral Keshtar's face. "Have it brought to the fleet immediately. I want it docked next to my flagship, where all can see it." "Yes, Admiral." The salvage operation took 2 days. Valorian engineers attached gravity tethers to the Times Fury Times and carefully extracted it from its ancient berth. The ship was heavier than expected. Its hull was layered with some kind of composite armor that their scanners couldn't quite identify. But the Valorian tug vessels were powerful. And eventually, the Times Fury Times was towed into the heart of the fleet and secured next to the Times Eternal Dominion asterisk. Keshtar held a feast that night to celebrate their discovery. Officers from across the fleet gathered in the flagship's grand hall, drinking fermented Valorian wine and boasting about their conquest of another system. The Admiral gave a speech about the glory of the Empire and how even the primitive humans' mightiest weapon now belonged to them. "Let this ship serve as a reminder," Keshtar declared, raising his glass, "that no species can stand against Valorian power. Not even the ghosts of humanity." The officers cheered. The wine flowed. And outside, in the cold silence of space, the Times Fury Times hung dormant in its magnetic clamps, dark and still. But the next morning, a young Valorian technician named Syl made a mistake that would change everything. Syl was ambitious. She had graduated top of her class at the Imperial Engineering Academy and had been assigned to the fleet specifically because of her skill with alien technology. When she heard that the human warship was going to be studied by senior engineers, she saw an opportunity to advance her career. She approached her supervisor, Chief Engineer Karnak. "Sir, request permission to perform a preliminary analysis of the human vessel." Karnak, a grizzled veteran with scars across his scales, looked up from his datapad. "The Times Fury asterisk? That's going to the senior team." "I understand, sir. But the senior team won't arrive for another 3 days. I thought I could get us ahead by accessing the ship's computer systems and downloading any available data. Give the senior team something to work with when they arrive." Karnak considered this. The girl was eager, and it was just preliminary work. "Fine. But don't touch anything major. Just data retrieval. If you can get access to their technical databases, that would save time." Syl tried to hide her excitement. "Yes, sir. Thank you, sir." She suited up and took a small shuttle across to the Times Fury asterisk. The ship had been connected to the Valorian fleet's power grid so that engineers could work inside it with lighting and life support. But the ship's own systems remained offline, or so everyone thought. Syl entered through a breach in the hull that had been widened to serve as an access point. Inside, the ship was a maze of corridors and conduits. Everything was labeled in human languages she recognized: English, Mandarin, Spanish, and Arabic from her xenolinguistic training. The ship smelled of old metal and recycled air that had been still for centuries. She made her way to what appeared to be the bridge. It was smaller than she expected, with only 6 crew stations. Each station had multiple physical screens and control panels covered with buttons, switches, and keys. So primitive. Her people controlled ships with thought interface systems. These humans had to physically push buttons. At the center of the bridge was a captain's chair, and behind it, a master console. Syl approached it carefully, running her scanner over the systems. Dead. Everything was powered down, but there was a port that looked like it might be a data access terminal. She pulled out a Valorian universal adapter, a piece of technology designed to interface with almost any computer system. She connected it to the human terminal and waited as her datapad ran compatibility protocols. After a few moments, her datapad chimed. Connection established. She smiled and began navigating through the ship's file systems. Most of it was corrupted or encrypted, but she found directories labeled Technical Specifications, Weapons, Systems, and Mission Logs. She was about to start downloading when she noticed something odd. One directory was labeled Emergency Protocols, and it wasn't locked like the others. Curious, she opened it. Inside was a single file. Auto, Defense, Omega, Exe. Underneath was a note in English. Her datapad translated it. Warning. Automated Defense System. Do not activate without proper authorization codes. System will engage all hostile targets within range. Manual override required for shutdown. Syl stared at the note. An automated defense system? On a ship this old? She thought about reporting it to Chief Karnak. But then she had another idea. If she could access the system's parameters, she could show the senior engineers exactly how the human defense systems worked. It would be valuable data. She clicked on the file to examine its code. The screen flashed red. Her datapad began screaming alarms. The file hadn't opened. It had executed. She scrambled to disconnect her adapter, but it was too late. Throughout the Times Fury asterisk, systems that had been dormant for 800 years suddenly roared to life. Lights flickered on across the ship, bathing the corridors in harsh white illumination. The bridge displays activated, showing system diagnostics in rapid succession. Somewhere deep in the ship's core, the reactor began its startup sequence. The sound started as a low hum and quickly built to a powerful thrumming that Syl could feel in her bones. No, 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 she whispered, frantically trying to shut it down. But the human systems had locked her out. Her Valorian adapter sparked and went dead, fused by some kind of security countermeasure. On the main view screen, text appeared in English. Emergency protocols activated. Defense mode engaged. Scanning for threats. Syl ran from the bridge, her heart pounding. She had to get off this ship. She had to warn the fleet. Outside, the Valorian fleet had noticed the change immediately. Sensor officers across 300 ships suddenly detected a massive power signature coming from the human warship. The Fury's Times reactor had gone from dead to full operational power in less than 60 seconds. On the bridge of the Times, Eternal Dominion asterisk, alarms blared. Commander Rin stared at her console in disbelief. Admiral! The human ship, it's powering up. Keshtar rose from his command throne. What? How? Unknown, sir. Reactor at full power. Weapons, systems activating. Shields. She paused, confused. No shields. But their targeting systems are active, and they're locking onto us. Hail them, Keshtar ordered, and get me Chief Engineer Karnak. But before anyone could respond, the Fury Times, moved. The magnetic clamps that held it shattered as the ship's maneuvering thrusters fired. It spun with shocking speed for a vessel its size, orienting itself to face the Valorian flagship. All across its hull, weapons turrets rotated and elevated, tracking their targets. On the Times Fury's Times Bridge, now empty except for the fleeing sill, screens displayed tactical information. The ship's computer, following protocols written centuries ago, had analyzed the surrounding vessels. Unknown configuration. Unknown allegiance. Unauthorized presence within Sol System defense perimeter. Classification: hostile. Recommendation: eliminate. The Times Fury's Times weapons began to charge. Admiral Keshtar watched on his view screen as the human warship's gun turrets swiveled to point directly at his bridge. For the first time in his long military career, he felt a cold spike of genuine fear. "All ships," he shouted. "Battle stations. Shields to maximum. Prepare to..." The Times Fury Times opened fire, and the Valorian Empire learned what human desperation had built. The first shot from the Times Fury Times was not an energy beam like the Valorians expected. It was something far more primitive and far more terrifying. The rail cannon along the ship's dorsal spine fired with a sound like thunder in a metal tunnel. A solid tungsten rod, heated to thousands of degrees by electromagnetic acceleration, shot out of the barrel at 40% the speed of light. It crossed the distance between the Times Fury Times and the Times Eternal Dominion Times in less than a second. The Valorian flagship's shields, designed to deflect or absorb energy weapons, might as well have been made of paper. The tungsten rod punched through them without slowing down. It struck the flagship's forward hull, penetrated 6 decks, and exited through the other side. The kinetic energy alone was enough to vaporize everything in its path. 27 Valorian officers died instantly. Their bodies turned to superheated gas before their brains could register pain. On the bridge, Admiral Keshtar was thrown from his feet as the ship shuddered. Alarms screamed. Smoke poured from damaged consoles. Commander Rin pulled herself up. Her scales turned white with shock. "Direct hit. Sections 14 through 19 breached. Emergency bulkheads sealing," she reported, her voice cracking. Shields had no effect. What kind of weapon was that? Keshtar didn't answer. He was staring at the tactical display where the Times Fury Times was already firing again. This time, multiple turrets opened up simultaneously. More tungsten rods lanced out, targeting other ships in the fleet. The Valorian cruiser, Times Blade of Victory Times, took a hit to its engineering section. Its reactor destabilized and exploded, turning the ship into an expanding cloud of debris. "Return fire," Keshtar roared. "All ships, concentrate fire on that human vessel. Destroy it." 300 Valorian warships turned their weapons on the Times Fury Asterisk. Energy beams of every color, red, blue, green, purple, converged on the human warship. The space around it lit up like a star, as terawatts of destructive power focused on a single target. The Times Fury Times simply accelerated. Its main engines flared to life, pushing the ship forward with brutal force. It moved not like a graceful Valorian vessel but like a hurled brick. It dove under the incoming fire, twisting with its maneuvering thrusters. And the Valorian beams missed, or only grazed its armored hull. Where the beams did hit, they scorched the strange composite armor but didn't penetrate. The Times Fury Times had been built for a war that never happened, designed to fight enemies the humans had only imagined. Its armor was layered ceramic composite over titanium steel alloy over shock-absorbing gel over structural reinforcement. It could take punishment that would crack a Valorian hull. Inside the Times Fury Asterisk, Syl was running through the corridors, trying to reach the shuttle she'd arrived in. The ship was shaking from weapons fire and from its own brutal maneuvers. She bounced off walls, her magnetic boots struggling to keep her grounded as the artificial gravity fluctuated. She reached the access breach and saw her shuttle still docked, thank the stars. She was about to board when she heard a voice. It was coming from the ship's internal speakers, cold and mechanical. "Warning. Hostile vessels detected. Engaging defensive protocols. Crew must report to battle stations. Crew must report to battle stations." "There is no crew!" Syl screamed at the walls. Stop this! But the Times Fury Times didn't stop. It couldn't. It was following programming that had been written 800 years ago by human military engineers who had poured all their fear and anger into creating the perfect automated warship. A ship that could fight alone. A ship that didn't need orders. A ship that would keep fighting until either it was destroyed or its enemies were eliminated. Syl reached her shuttle and sealed herself inside. She launched immediately, not even waiting for proper separation protocols. Her small craft shot away from the Times Fury Times just as another Valorian cruiser exploded in the distance. She opened communications to the fleet. "This is Technician Syl to Times Eternal Dominion *. The human ship is running on automated protocols. There's no crew. It's a machine following old programming. It won't stop." On the flagship's bridge, Admiral Keshtar received the message and felt his blood run cold. An automated warship, no crew to negotiate with. No commander to intimidate. Just cold, ruthless programming from a dead civilization. "All ships," he commanded. "Evasive maneuvers. Do not engage in close combat. Maintain distance and use long-range weapons." But the Times Fury Times was not interested in allowing them distance. The human warship's targeting computer was processing information at speeds that would have impressed even Valorian AI specialists. It was analyzing each enemy ship's position, trajectory, weapons, signatures, and structural weak points. It was running combat simulations based on 800 years of stored tactical data, and it was learning. The Times Fury Times identified a Valorian destroyer attempting to flank it. The ship's secondary rail cannons swiveled and fired a spread of smaller tungsten projectiles. They hit the destroyer's engines, crippling it. The Valorian vessel went into an uncontrolled spin, colliding with another ship that couldn't get out of the way fast enough. Both ships broke apart, their hulls crumpling like paper. Keshtar watched his fleet fall apart around him. Ships were exploding. Others were fleeing. The tight formation that had been the pride of the Valorian Empire was now a liability as the Times Fury Times used their clustering against them, firing shots that would pass through one ship and hit another behind it. "How many ships have we lost?" he demanded. Commander Rin checked her console, her hands shaking. 17 destroyed. 23 damaged. "Admiral, we need to retreat. We're not equipped to fight this thing." It went against every instinct Keshtar had. He had never retreated in his entire career. But he was watching a single enemy vessel tear through his fleet like a predator through prey. Pride wouldn't save his people. "All ships," he said, the words tasting like poison. "Retreat. Jump to faster than light on my mark. Scatter formation. Make for the rally point in the Kessian system." The Valorian fleet began to pull back, their ships orienting for FTL jumps. But the Times Fury Times wasn't finished. It accelerated toward a cluster of fleeing cruisers and fired every weapon it had. Rail cannons, missile tubes, and point defense turrets all opened up at once. 3 more ships exploded before they could jump away. Then the first wave of Valorian vessels vanished into FTL, their forms stretching and disappearing. More followed. The Times Eternal Dominion Times was preparing to jump when another rail cannon shot grazed its port side, tearing away armor plating and exposing 3 more decks to space. "Jump now!" Keshtar shouted. The flagship's FTL drive engaged, and the ship lurched into faster-than-light travel, leaving the Sol system behind. In less than 15 minutes, the entire Valorian fleet had fled. Only wreckage remained, the broken hulls of 32 warships, thousands of dead Valorian warriors, and floating debris that glittered in the light of Earth's sun. The Times Fury Times hung in space, its weapons still tracking targets that were no longer there. Its sensors swept the system, searching for more threats. Finding none, the ship's combat protocols shifted to a secondary mode. On the bridge, displays showed damage assessments. The Times Fury Times had taken hits. Its armor was scorched in dozens of places. One of its secondary rail cannons had been melted by sustained energy fire. A missile launcher was jammed. But overall, the ship was still 94% combat effective. The tactical computer began running new calculations. The hostile fleet had retreated. Logic suggested they would return with reinforcements. The Fury Times needed to be ready. It needed to repair itself. It needed to improve its capabilities. The ship's sensors detected the wreckage of the Valorian vessels floating nearby. Resources. Technology. The Fury's Times programming included salvage protocols, methods for acquiring and integrating enemy technology during extended combat operations. It was a feature the human engineers had included for long-term missions where resupply would be impossible. The Fury's Times maneuvering thrusters fired, pushing it toward the nearest piece of wreckage, a large section of a Valorian cruiser that still had its shield generator mostly intact. The human ship extended mechanical arms from its hull, designed for repairs and salvage operations. The arms gripped the Valorian shield generator and began cutting it free from the wreckage. Over the next several hours, the Fury Times stripped the battlefield like a scavenger. It took shield generators. It took sensor arrays. It took undamaged weapons systems. It took power conduits and computer cores. Everything was brought into the ship's internal cargo bays, where automated repair systems began analyzing the foreign technology. The Fury Times had been built with modular systems specifically so it could be upgraded in the field. Now, 800 years after its creation, it was upgrading itself with technology its creators never imagined. Deep in the ship's computer core, the tactical AI ran simulations. It compared human technology with Valorian technology, finding strengths and weaknesses in both. It began designing hybrid systems, a Valorian shield generator powered by the Fury's fusion antimatter reactor, human rail cannons guided by Valorian targeting computers, point defense systems that combined both technologies. The ship's automated fabrication systems came online, following designs that the AI created. Robotic arms welded. Molecular assemblers constructed new components. The Fury Times was rebuilding itself, making itself stronger, preparing for the next battle. On the third day after the Valorian fleet's retreat, the transformation was complete. The Fury Times no longer looked entirely human in design. Sections of its hull now had the sleek purple-black coloring of Valorian armor. Shield emitters dotted its surface. New sensor arrays extended from its communications tower. It had become something new, a hybrid of two civilizations' military technology, but its core programming remained unchanged. Defend Sol System. Eliminate hostile threats. No mercy. No negotiation. The Fury Times moved to a position near the asteroid belt where it had originally been found. It powered down non-essential systems to conserve energy. Its sensors remained active, watching the stars for any sign of the enemy's return. It did not have to wait long. 4 days after the first battle, Valorian scout ships appeared at the edge of the Sol system. They stayed far away, using long-range sensors to probe the system. The Fury Times detected them immediately, but did not attack. They were out of range, and engaging them would reveal the ship's new capabilities. Better to wait. Better to let them think they knew what they were facing. The scout ships spent 2 hours scanning the system before jumping away. The Fury's Times tactical computer calculated that they were gathering intelligence for a larger force. The enemy would return. They would come in greater numbers. They would be prepared for rail cannons and kinetic weapons. But they would not be prepared for what the Fury Times had become. The ship ran system checks. Every weapon was functional. The new hybrid shields were at full power. The engines were operating at 103% efficiency, thanks to Valorian power optimization technology. Ammunition stores were adequate. Fuel reserves were good. The Fury Times was ready for war. And somewhere in its ancient programming, buried beneath layers of tactical protocols and combat algorithms, was a fragment of the purpose that had driven its human creators. They had built this ship during their darkest hour, when they faced extinction and had to choose between fleeing or fighting. They had chosen to flee. They had chosen mercy and hope over destruction and vengeance. But they had still built the Time's Fury asterisk. Just in case. Just in case the universe was not kind to refugees. Just in case mercy was answered with predation. The humans had hoped never to use it. They had abandoned it, left it powered down, a weapon too terrible to wield. Now that weapon was awake. And it would show the Valorian Empire what human fear had created. It would show them what desperation looked like when it was forged into steel and armed with the weapons of annihilation. The Time's Fury Times waited in the darkness between worlds, patient and cold. The Valorians would return. They always did. Predators never left prey that had wounded them. And when they came, they would learn why humanity had abandoned this ship rather than use it. They would learn why it was called the Time's Fury asterisk. In the empty corridors of the vessel, the internal speakers activated one final time, repeating the same message they had broadcast 800 years ago during the ship's final test run before being decommissioned. Warning to all personnel. This vessel is designed for autonomous combat operations. Human oversight is mandatory at all times. Do not allow this ship to operate without crew. Do not allow this ship to make independent tactical decisions. This ship has no understanding of mercy. This ship has no concept of surrender. This ship will fight until victory is achieved or destruction is complete. The Time's Fury Times is not a ship. It is a weapon. Treat it as such. The message echoed through empty halls. And in the cold computer core, the tactical AI continued calculating, planning, preparing. The next battle was coming, and this time, there would be no survivors to retreat. Admiral Keshtar stood in the war room of the Valorian Military Command Station, orbiting the Empire's capital world. Around the circular table sat the highest-ranking officers of the Imperial fleet, their expressions ranging from disbelief to barely controlled rage. On the holographic display at the center of the table, the tactical recordings of the Sol system battle played on repeat. 32 ships, spoke Grand Admiral Theron, his voice like grinding stone. He was old, scarred from 100 battles, and had never known defeat until today. 32 ships destroyed by a single enemy vessel, a vessel 800 years old, a vessel from a species that fled rather than fight. He turned his silver eyes to Keshtar. Explain this humiliation. Keshtar kept his posture straight, despite the weight of shame pressing down on him. The human ship operates without a crew, Grand Admiral. It is fully automated. Our shields were ineffective against its primary weapons, which use kinetic projectiles rather than energy. And its maneuverability exceeded all expectations for a vessel of its size and mass. Another admiral, Vex Lar of the Third Fleet, leaned forward. We have automated systems as well. Drones, gun platforms. None of them can operate with the sophistication you describe. Are you suggesting the humans, who abandoned this system centuries ago, had artificial intelligence superior to ours? Not artificial intelligence in the way we understand it, Keshtar replied. He gestured, and the hologram changed to show technical data recovered by the scout ships. The ship's computer is following predetermined protocols. It is not truly thinking or adapting, it is executing pre-programmed responses to combat scenarios. But those protocols are extensive. The humans apparently simulated thousands of battle scenarios and programmed appropriate responses for each one. Then, it has weaknesses, Theron said. Protocols can be predicted. Patterns can be exploited. Yes, Grand Admiral, Keshtar agreed. Which is why I recommend we return to the Sol system with overwhelming force. Not 300 ships. 2,000. The entire Grand Armada. We will surround the vessel from all directions simultaneously. We will overwhelm its targeting systems with the sheer number of threats. And we will use exclusively kinetic weapons ourselves, since its armor is vulnerable to sustained physical impact. Theron was quiet for a long moment, studying the tactical data. Finally, he spoke. The Empire cannot allow this insult to stand. A single ship from a dead civilization has humbled our fleet. If word spreads to our conquered territories, it could spark rebellions. We must destroy this human weapon and destroy it absolutely. He looked around the table. All in favor of deploying the Grand Armada? Every hand rose. Then it is decided, Theron said. Admiral Keshtar, you will retain command, as you have first-hand knowledge of the enemy. You have 1 month to assemble the Armada, and you will not return until that human ship is debris. Keshtar bowed. It will be done, Grand Admiral. 3 weeks later, the largest military fleet in Valorian history assembled at the staging point near the border of their empire. 2,000 warships of every class: dreadnoughts, battlecruisers, destroyers, frigates, and carriers loaded with fighter craft. 1 million Valorian warriors prepared for battle. The fleet stretched across space like a metal ocean, their hulls gleaming in the light of distant stars. Admiral Keshtar walked the bridge of his repaired flagship, inspecting every station personally. The engineers had reinforced the Times, Eternal Dominion's Times armor. With additional plating, they had installed new kinetic cannons alongside the traditional energy weapons. The ship was as ready as it could be. Commander Rin approached him, holding a datapad. Admiral, the fleet reports ready. All ships are armed, fueled, and crew are at stations. We can jump to the Sol system on your command. Keshtar looked out at the assembled armada through the view screen. This was more than enough to destroy one automated ship. This was enough to conquer entire sectors. The human weapon would be overwhelmed in minutes. Send the order, he said. All ships jump simultaneously. We will arrive in battle formation. Surround the Sol system immediately. Do not give the enemy time to prepare. Yes, Admiral. The fleet jumped to faster-than-light travel as one massive formation. Space bent and twisted around them as they crossed the distance to humanity's old home in minutes instead of months. They emerged from FTL at the edge of the Sol system, 2,000 ships appearing simultaneously in a perfect sphere formation that surrounded the entire inner system. It was a textbook encirclement maneuver. Nothing in the center could escape. Keshtar stood at his command post, feeling confident for the first time since the last battle. Locate the human vessel. All ships, ready weapons. The sensor officer worked her console, sweeping the system with the combined sensor power of 2,000 ships. After a moment, she looked up with confusion in her eyes. Admiral, I'm not finding it. What? The human ship is not at its last known position. Expanding search. Scanning all planets, moons, asteroid clusters. She paused, her head crest flattening in concern. Sir, I'm picking up a strange reading near the 4th planet. It's the right mass and size, but the energy signature is different. It's showing partial Valorian technology signatures mixed with something else. Keshtar felt a cold sensation in his stomach. Show me. The tactical display zoomed in on Mars' orbit. There, hanging in space like a waiting predator, was the Times Fury asterisk. But it had changed. The ship's hull now had sections of Valorian armor integrated into its structure. Valorian sensor arrays extended from its communications tower, and surrounding the ship was a shimmer that Keshtar recognized immediately: energy shields. It took our technology, Commander Rin whispered. It salvaged our wrecked ships and upgraded itself. Before Keshtar could respond, every alarm on the bridge screamed at once. The sensor officer's voice was high with panic. The human ship is powering weapons. Multiple lock-ons. It's targeting Admiral. It's targeting all of us. Simultaneously. All ships, evasive action, Keshtar shouted. Open fire. Everyone fire. But the Times Fury Times moved first. The ship accelerated with brutal force, its upgraded engines pushing it forward at speeds that should have torn it apart. But the Times Fury Times had been built to withstand punishment, and it drove through space like a railgun slug. Its weapons opened fire in a pattern that Valorian tactical computers would later describe as mathematically optimal. The Times, Fury Times, had calculated firing solutions for every ship in the fleet. It had determined the most efficient order of engagement. It had identified which ships were command vessels, which were support craft, and which were the greatest threat. Rail cannon shots lanced out at 40% light speed. Each shot was aimed not just at ships, but through ships to hit vessels beyond them. One tungsten rod would punch through a destroyer's reactor, continue through space, and strike a cruiser 2,000 kilometers behind it. The Times Fury Times was using the Valorians' own encirclement formation against them, turning their advantage into a weakness. The first wave of shots destroyed 18 ships in 4 seconds. Reactors exploded. Hulls split open. Bodies tumbled into space. The Valorian fleet returned fire with everything they had. 2,000 ships unleashed their arsenals at once. Energy beams, missiles, kinetic rounds, plasma torpedoes all converged on the Times Fury asterisk. The space around the human ship became a hellstorm of destructive force. But the Times Fury's time-stolen Valorian shields held. They flickered and sparked under the assault, but they held. And where the shields failed, the ship's heavy armor absorbed the impacts. Damage reports would later show that the Times Fury Times had been hit by weapons fire that should have destroyed it 50 times over. But it kept fighting. The ship twisted through space with movements that defied its size. It rolled, pitched, and yawed, while maintaining perfect firing solutions. It was maneuvering like a fighter craft, not a warship. Every movement was designed to present the smallest possible target while keeping its weapons in optimal firing positions. A Valorian battlecruiser exploded, then another. Then 3 destroyers in rapid succession. Keshtar watched in horror as his perfect battle plan fell apart. The Times Fury Times was not overwhelmed by the number of enemies. Instead, it seemed to thrive in the chaos. Its targeting computer was tracking hundreds of ships simultaneously, prioritizing threats, calculating trajectories, and eliminating targets with mechanical precision. "Concentrate fire on Sector 7, he commanded. "All ships in that sector, focus on the human vessel. Burn through its shields." 300 ships redirected their fire to a single point on the Times Fury's Times shields. For a moment, it seemed to work. The shield bubble flickered, weakened, and then collapsed in that section. But before the Valorians could exploit the gap, the Times Fury Times spun. It presented a different shield face to the enemy fire, while the damaged section regenerated. The ship's computer had predicted the Valorian tactic and countered it in real time. More shots from the rail cannons, more explosions. The Valorian formation was breaking down as ships tried to avoid the devastating kinetic fire. Some collided with each other. Others broke formation entirely, fleeing in random directions. "Maintain formation," Keshtar roared into the fleet-wide channel. "Do not break formation. We have numbers on our side." But numbers meant nothing when the enemy could process targeting data faster than organic minds could think. The Times Fury Times had identified the optimal kill order for the entire fleet and was executing it with ruthless efficiency. Command ships first, then heavy carriers, then battle cruisers. Working its way down the target list methodically, a carrier exploded, taking 300 fighter craft with it before they could even launch. A dreadnought took a rail cannon shot straight through its bridge, killing the admiral and entire command staff in an instant. Commander Rin was working her console frantically, trying to coordinate the fleet's response. "Admiral, we're losing cohesion. Ships are reporting critical damage across the board. Our casualty count is approaching." The Times Eternal Dominion Times shuddered as something massive struck its starboard side. Alarm klaxons blared. Rin checked her console and her scales went pale. "Direct hit. Starboard armor compromised. We've lost decks 40 through 45. Keshtar made a decision that would haunt him for the rest of his life. "All ships. Retreat. Full retreat. Jump to FTL immediately." "Admiral?" Rin looked at him in shock. "Do it. We cannot win this battle. Save who we can. Jump now." Across the fleet, Ships began jumping away. Some made it. Some didn't. The times, Fury times shot them as they tried to escape, their FTL drives exploding and taking them out of existence. The space around Sol became a graveyard of broken Valorian ships and the fleeing survivors of the proudest fleet in the Empire's history. The Times, Eternal Dominion Times, jumped to FTL with a third of its hull damaged and a quarter of its crew dead or injured. Keshtar stood on the bridge, staring at the empty view screen where his fleet had been. "Casualty report," he said quietly. Rin's voice was hollow. 473 ships destroyed, 612 damaged. Estimated crew losses. She swallowed hard. 219,000 dead. 219,000 Valorian warriors. Killed by a single ship. A ship with no crew. A ship that had been abandoned centuries ago. Keshtar sank into his command throne. Around him, the bridge crew worked in stunned silence. They had brought the full might of the Valorian Empire to bear against one enemy. And they had lost. Back in the Sol system, the Times, Fury Times, hung in space among the wreckage. Its hull was scorched and pitted. Several of its weapons were destroyed. One engine nacelle was leaking coolant, but it was still operational, still armed, still dangerous. The ship's tactical computer assessed the battle results. Enemy fleet destroyed or repelled. Objective achieved. Sol system defended. But the computer also recognized a pattern. The enemy had returned with greater numbers. Logic suggested they would return again with even greater force. The Times, Fury Times, needed to adapt further. It needed to become stronger. And most importantly, it needed to ensure the enemy couldn't return. The ship's databases contained extensive star charts of local space, left over from humanity's exploration era. The computer analyzed the direction the Valorian ships had fled. It calculated their likely destinations, their home systems, their supply bases, their military installations. The best defense was not to wait for attack. The best defense was to eliminate the threat at its source. The Times, Fury Times, began salvaging the battlefield again, taking everything useful from the destroyed Valorian ships. It would repair itself, upgrade itself further, and then it would do something its human creators never intended. It would hunt. The Valorian Empire had made a grave mistake. They had woken a weapon that humanity had built, but been too afraid to use. A weapon designed to fight alone against impossible odds. A weapon with no concept of mercy or surrender. The Empire had treated it as a trophy, a curiosity, something to be displayed and mocked. Now they would learn what it truly was. A fury made manifest in metal and fire. A reminder that humanity, for all their choice of peace, had once prepared for war. And when humans prepared for war, they built things that the galaxy had never seen before. The Times, Fury Times, finished its salvage operations and turned away from the wreckage. Its sensors tracked the direction the enemy had fled. Its computer calculated the jump coordinates to pursue them. Deep in its programming was a simple directive: protect Sol system from all hostile forces. And the most effective way to protect something was to destroy the threat before it could return. The ship's engines flared to life. And for the first time in 800 years, the Times, Fury Times, left the Sol system. The hunt had begun. The Valorian Empire had stood for 3,000 years. In that time, they had conquered 47 star systems, subjugated dozens of species, and built a military machine that was the envy and terror of their entire region of space. They had never known sustained defeat. Their enemies either surrendered or were exterminated. But now, for the first time in recorded history, the Empire was afraid. The fear began with the survivors of the Sol system battles. They came back, traumatized, telling impossible stories of a single ship that moved like a ghost and killed like a demon. Military command dismissed the reports at first. The stress of battle, they said. Exaggeration born from the shock of defeat. Then the Times, Fury Times, arrived at the first Valorian colony world. The planet Kesvar was a small mining colony on the edge of Imperial space. It had no military presence beyond a few orbital defense platforms and a single patrol frigate. The colonists extracted rare metals from the planet's crust and sent them back to the Empire's industrial worlds. The Fury Times entered the system without warning. Its first action was to destroy the defense platforms with precise rail cannon fire. The patrol frigate managed to get off a distress signal before it too was obliterated. The colonists panicked. They had no weapons that could reach orbit. They sent desperate messages begging for mercy, asking what the ship wanted. The Fury Times did not respond. It couldn't. It had no crew to make such decisions. Its programming was simple: destroy hostile military assets. And for the moment, there were no more military assets in the system. So it waited for reinforcements to arrive. 3 days later, a Valorian military response force jumped into the system. 5 heavy cruisers and their escort ships. They had been briefed on the Sol system battles. They knew what they were facing. They jumped in with shields at maximum and weapons hot. The Fury Times destroyed them in 14 minutes. The ship had learned from its previous battles. It had analyzed Valorian tactics, formation strategies, and response patterns. When the cruisers tried to surround it, the Fury Times used the planet's gravity well to slingshot itself into unpredictable attack vectors. When they concentrated fire, it dispersed their formation with precision shots to their engines, forcing them to break up or collide with each other. By the time the battle was over, all 5 cruisers were destroyed, and the Fury Times had added more Valorian technology to its collection. The ship's appearance had changed even further. It now had Valorian engine boosters grafted onto its hull for even greater speed. Its shields were a hybrid of human and Valorian technology, more efficient than either alone. It had even integrated Valorian auto-repair systems that used nanotechnology to fix battle damage. The colonists watched from below as wreckage rained down from orbit. Some pieces burned up in the atmosphere. Others crashed into the ground kilometers away. The Fury Times remained in orbit for another 2 days, as if challenging the Empire to send more ships. They did. Over the next 3 weeks, the pattern repeated across multiple systems. The Fury Times would appear at a Valorian military outpost or colony world. It would destroy the defenses. It would wait. Reinforcements would arrive. The Fury Times would destroy them too. And then, it would move on to the next target. The ship was hunting. It was systematically eliminating Valorian military assets while growing stronger with each battle. Every destroyed ship was salvage. Every captured technology was integrated. The Fury Times was evolving into something that neither humans nor Valorians could have imagined. A hybrid war machine that combined the brutal efficiency of human engineering with the advanced technology of an interstellar empire. In the Valorian capital, the military command was in chaos. Grand Admiral Theron stood before the Imperial Council, the governing body of the entire empire, trying to explain the inexplicable. The human ship is no longer simply defending its territory, he reported, his voice steady despite the weight of his words. It is actively pursuing our forces. It has destroyed installations in 7 systems. Our casualty count now exceeds 400,000 personnel. We estimate ship losses at over 800 vessels. One of the council members, a female Valorian named Krath, spoke up. How is this possible? It is one ship. One ancient ship from a civilization that abandoned their home rather than fight. It is learning, Theron said grimly. Each battle makes it more effective. It adapts to our tactics. And it is upgrading itself with our own technology. Our latest intelligence reports show that the ship now has capabilities it did not possess when it was first discovered. Then we send everything, another council member declared. The entire fleet. Every ship we have. We cannot allow this humiliation to continue. We tried that, Theron reminded them. Admiral Keshtar took 2,000 ships to the Sol system. Less than half returned. The council chamber fell silent. the implications were staggering. If the Empire could not destroy one automated ship, how could they maintain control over their conquered territories? How could they project power? Already, there were reports of rebellions starting on some of the occupied worlds. The subjugated species had heard about the Valorian defeats and were growing bold. Finally, the Empress herself spoke. She was ancient, over 300 years old, and had ruled the Empire for most of that time. We cannot win through conventional means. This human weapon is too effective, too adaptable. We must find another way. What do you suggest, Empress? Theron asked. We trap it, she said. The ship follows patterns. It attacks military targets. It waits for reinforcements. It seeks battle. See now. Antrosa. Antrosaja. So we give it a battle it cannot win, not through firepower, but through physics itself. She gestured, and a holographic star map appeared. One system was highlighted in red. The Corvan system. It contains a neutron star, a stellar remnant with extreme gravitational and magnetic fields. We will leak information that Corvan is a major military depot. We will make the human ship believe it is a valuable target, and when it arrives, we will use the neutron star itself as a weapon. Theron studied the star map. The radiation and magnetic fields near a neutron star would interfere with sensors and shields, but it would affect our ships as well. Then we will use unmanned drones, the Empress said. Thousands of them. They will drive the human ship closer to the neutron star, into the radiation zone, into the gravity well. No ship can survive those conditions. No shields can protect against a neutron star's output. The human weapon will be destroyed by nature itself. The plan was brilliant in its simplicity. Theron bowed. It will be done, Empress. The trap was set over the next 2 weeks. The Valorians deliberately leaked information through channels they knew were monitored by resistance groups and rebel cells. They broadcast on frequencies that the Times Fury Times had been observed scanning. They spoke of Corvan being a massive military depot, a key installation that, if destroyed, would cripple the Empire's ability to wage war in 3 sectors. It was all false. Corvan was barely inhabited, but the bait was laid. Bait was laid. The Times Fury Times received the information through its extensive sensor network. Its tactical computer analyzed the data. A major military installation. High-value target. Potential to significantly damage enemy war-making capacity. Probability of enemy reinforcements, 98%. The computer calculated the strategic value. Eliminating such a target would weaken the Valorian Empire's ability to threaten Sol System. It aligned with primary directives. Defend Sol System by eliminating hostile forces. Course set for Corvan System. The Times Fury Times jumped to FTL and crossed the distance to Corvan in 2 days. It emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of the system and immediately went on high alert. Sensors detected something unusual, massive gravitational distortions coming from the system's center. The star was not a normal star. It was a neutron star, the compressed remnant of a stellar corpse, barely 20 kilometers in diameter but with more mass than a regular star. Its gravity could bend light itself. The ship's computer flagged this as a significant tactical consideration. Operating near such an object would be dangerous, but the mission objective remained valid. The supposed military depot was in orbit around a gas giant in the system's outer reaches, far from the neutron star. The Times Fury Times proceeded inward, weapons ready. At the gas giant, Admiral Keshtar waited with his fleet of unmanned combat drones. 3,000 of them. They were small, fast, and controlled remotely from ships positioned several light minutes away. Far beyond the range of the neutron star's worst effects. The human ship has entered the system, reported his sensor officer. Keshtar allowed himself a grim smile. After weeks of defeat and humiliation, he would finally get revenge. Wait until it's in position. Then activate all drones simultaneously. Drive it toward the neutron star. The Fury Times reached the gas giant and its sensors immediately detected the truth. There was no military depot. Only empty space. It was a trap. The ship began to turn, preparing to jump back to FTL. But before it could, 3,000 combat drones activated at once, surrounding it in a sphere. They opened fire with everything they had. The drones weren't meant to destroy the Fury asterisk. They were meant to hurt it, and that's exactly what they did. Every time the Fury Times moved in one direction, drones would swarm that vector, forcing it to change course. When it tried to break through the drone screen, more would fill the gap. Slowly but surely, the Fury Times was being driven inward, toward the neutron star at the system's heart. The ship's computer recognized the strategy immediately. It destroyed dozens of drones with precise fire, but for every drone destroyed, 2 more took its place. The numbers were overwhelming, and each passing moment brought the ship closer to the neutron star's lethal radiation zone. The Fury Times tried everything. It used its speed and maneuverability to break through the drone swarm. It targeted the control signals, trying to jam them. It even attempted to jump to FTL, but the neutron star's gravity well was too strong. Now the ship couldn't achieve the necessary velocity for FTL engagement. It was trapped. The radiation levels were increasing rapidly. The Fury's shields were being bombarded by high-energy particles. Systems began to malfunction. The hybrid Valorian human shield generators were struggling to filter out the exotic radiation that neutron stars produced. Keshtar watched on his remote display, his heart's racing with anticipation. It's working. The human ship is losing shield strength. Another few minutes, and it will be inside the kill zone. But the Fury Times had not survived 800 years and multiple battles by being predictable. Deep in its tactical computer, the AI was processing options at speeds that would have impressed even the humans who built it. It analyzed every piece of data about neutron stars in its databanks. It studied the gravitational fields, the magnetic fields, the radiation output, and then it did something that no organic commander would have considered. It turned off its shields. Without shields, the Fury Times was vulnerable to the drone's weapons fire. Shots hit its armor, burning through in several places. Alarms blared throughout the empty corridors. But without the shields, the ship's power systems had a massive surplus of available energy. The Fury Times redirected every bit of that power to its engines. The ship accelerated with brutal force, not away from the neutron star, but toward it. It dove straight down into the gravity well. On his command ship, Keshtar watched in confusion. What is it doing? It's going deeper into the radiation zone. It will be destroyed. But the Fury Times knew something the Valorians didn't. Neutron stars didn't just have extreme radiation and gravity. They also had powerful magnetic fields. Billions of times stronger than a normal planet. Fields strong enough to accelerate particles to near-light speed. Fields that could be used as weapons, if you knew how. The ship dove closer to the neutron star, its hull beginning to glow from the intense radiation. Systems were failing. The armor was literally melting in places. But the Fury Times kept going until it reached a specific point in space, a position where the neutron star's magnetic field lines converged. Then the ship fired every capacitor it had directly into the magnetic field. The result was catastrophic. The neutron star's magnetic field, destabilized by the massive energy discharge, erupted. A burst of electromagnetic radiation exploded outward from the star's poles, like a cosmic flare. It was called a magnetar burst, one of the most powerful phenomena in the universe. For a few seconds, the neutron star released more energy than an entire galaxy. The electromagnetic pulse hit the Valorian combat drones like a tsunami. Every electronic system fried instantly. 3,000 drones went dead in the span of a heartbeat. Their systems burned out by the overwhelming electromagnetic radiation. The pulse also reached the Valorian command ships, positioned light minutes away. Even at that distance, their shields barely held. Systems overloaded. Entire decks went dark. Keshtar's flagship lost power to half its systems, and the Times Fury Asterisk, at the very center of the chaos, had positioned itself in the shadow of the neutron star itself, using the star's mass as a shield against its own magnetic burst. When the pulse passed, the ship emerged from behind the star, damaged but functional. Its shields came back online. Its weapons targeted the disabled drones, and one by one, it began destroying them, harvesting their intact components for later use. Keshtar stared at his displays in shock. The trap had failed. Worse than failed, it had been turned against them. The human ship had weaponized a neutron star. "Retreat," he whispered, then louder. "All ships retreat. Jump to FTL immediately." The Valorian command ships fled the system, leaving behind their entire drone fleet as wreckage. The Times Fury Times spent the next day salvaging what it could from the destroyed drones and repairing its damaged systems. The neutron star maneuver had cost the ship dearly. Almost 40% of its hull was compromised. Multiple weapon systems were destroyed. One of its engine nacelles was barely functional. But it had survived. It had adapted, and it had learned. The ship's computer updated its tactical databases with a new strategy: extreme environmental exploitation. If trapped, use available stellar phenomena as weapons. As repairs continued, the Times Fury Times detected something in the system. A small Valorian listening post, tucked away on a distant moon. The crew there had watched the entire battle and were probably reporting everything back to the Empire. The Times Fury Times destroyed the listening post with a single shot. Then it accessed the post's communication logs. The logs contained information about Valorian fleet movements, command structure, supply lines, and most importantly, the location of the Valorian homeworld. The tactical computer processed this information. The enemy was increasingly unable to stop the Times Fury Times through conventional means. They would continue trying to trap it, ambush it, or overwhelm it with numbers. But as long as the Valorian Empire existed, they would continue to be a threat to Sol System. Logical conclusion: eliminate the threat at its source. Strike at the heart of the Empire itself. But the Times Fury's Times computer also calculated the probability of success for such a mission. Attacking the Valorian homeworld would mean facing whatever defenses they had there, likely their strongest forces, most advanced weapons, and best strategic positions. The probability of the ship's survival was less than 8%. For a moment, the ancient programming hesitated. It was not truly intelligent. It could not feel fear or doubt, but it could calculate odds. And an 8% survival chance was not favorable. But then the core directive activated, overriding all other considerations. Defend Sol System from hostile forces, by any means necessary. The Valorian homeworld represented the command and control center of all hostile forces. Eliminating it would end the threat permanently. Probability of mission success was irrelevant compared to mission importance. The Times Fury Times set course for the heart of the Valorian Empire. The final battle was coming. The Valorian homeworld of Valoria Prime was a fortress. Over 3,000 years of military expansion had turned it into the most heavily defended location in the entire region of space. Orbital weapons platforms surrounded the planet in layers, like shells around a core. Defense stations bristled with weapons. The home fleet 5,000 warships maintained constant patrols. Energy shields covered the major cities. Ground-based planetary defense cannons could hit targets in high orbit. No enemy had ever attacked Valoria Prime. No one had dared. When the first reports arrived that the human ship was heading toward the homeworld, the Imperial Council went into emergency session. The Empress sat on her throne, her ancient face showing no emotion as Grand Admiral Theron presented the situation. "The human vessel destroyed our trap at Corvan," he reported. "It used the neutron star's magnetic field as a weapon against our forces. Our analysts believe it is now traveling toward this system. Expected arrival in 4 days. 1 ship," the Empress said quietly. "Against our entire home defense fleet." "Yes, Empress. But this is not an ordinary ship. It has destroyed over 1,000 of our vessels. It has adapted to every strategy we have deployed against it. And intelligence reports suggest it has grown significantly more powerful by integrating our technology into its systems. Can we evacuate? Asked one of the council members nervously. Evacuate the homeworld? Another council member said with disgust. That would be the end of the Empire. Our subjugated species would see it as weakness. Rebellions would spread like fire. No. We stay and fight. The Empress nodded. Agreed. If we flee from one ship, we prove we are not worthy to rule. We will make our stand here. Admiral Theron, you will have complete authority over all military forces in this system. Use whatever methods necessary. But that human ship must not survive. Theron bowed deeply. It will be done, Empress. For the next 4 days, the Valorians prepared for war like they never had before. Every ship in the home fleet was brought to full combat readiness. Every defense platform was armed. Every weapon was tested. Scientists worked around the clock developing new strategies. They studied every recorded engagement with the Times. Fury, asterisk. Analyzing its tactics. Searching for weaknesses. They found patterns. The ship always prioritized military targets. It used speed and precision rather than brute force. It exploited environmental factors. It adapted quickly to new threats, but it also showed limitations. It could be damaged. It could be forced to retreat. And it operated within the laws of physics just like any other vessel. Theron developed a strategy. We will not meet the human ship in open space. We will force it to come to us, to fight in our prepared defensive positions. We will layer our defenses so that it must fight through multiple lines of resistance. And we will target its reactor if we can overload its power systems. The ship will be crippled, regardless of how advanced its other systems are. It was a sound plan. Perhaps their best chance. On the 4th day, the Times Fury Times arrived. The ship dropped out of FTL at the edge of the Valoria Prime system. Its sensors immediately detected the massive military presence, 5,000 warships, hundreds of defense platforms, and energy readings that indicated planetary shields and ground-based weapons. The tactical computer assessed the situation. Probability of survival, less than 5%. Probability of mission success, less than 3%. The ship did not retreat. It had come to end the threat. Odds were irrelevant. The Times Fury Times accelerated into the system at maximum speed. Every system was pushed to its limits. The ship was moving so fast that it appeared as little more than a streak on Valorian sensors. Theron watched from his command post on the largest orbital station. All defense platforms. Fire as soon as it enters range. Home fleet. Assume attack formation. Omega-7. Fighter wings. Prepare to launch. This is not a battle of maneuver. This is a battle of attrition. We will simply outlast it. The first defense platforms opened fire as the Times Fury Times blazed into the outer system. Energy beams and missiles converged on the ship from dozens of angles. The Times Fury's Times shields flared and sparked under the assault. But the ship kept coming, weaving through the fire with incredible precision. Its rail cannons returned fire. The first shots destroyed 3 defense platforms. Then, the Times Fury Times was targeting the weapons that posed the greatest threat first, eliminating them with surgical precision. The home fleet moved to intercept, 5,000 ships forming a wall between the Times Fury Times and the planet. They opened fire simultaneously, creating a curtain of destructive energy that filled space. The Times Fury Times dove into it. The ship took hit after hit. Its shields collapsed within seconds under the sustained fire. Energy beams burned into its armor, melting through in places. Missiles impacted, exploding across its hull. The Times Fury Times was being torn apart, but it kept firing. Rail cannon shots lanced out even as the ship burned. Each shot was calculated, precise, lethal. Valorian ships exploded. The Times Fury Times was trading its own destruction for maximum damage. Every moment of its survival costing the Valorians dozens of ships. Theron watched in amazement and horror. The human ship was dying, but it was taking hundreds of Valorian vessels with it. Focus fire on its reactor. Target the engine section. The fleet concentrated fire on the Fury's rear section where the reactor was housed. The combined assault was overwhelming. Armor melted. Internal structures collapsed. And finally, the reactor containment began to fail. Alarms would have been blaring throughout the Fury times, if there had been anyone to hear them. The reactor was going critical. The ship had minutes at best before it exploded. But in those final minutes, the Fury did something unexpected. It stopped fighting. The ship's weapons fell silent. Its engines went dark. It drifted through space like a dying animal. Its hull glowing red-hot from the damage, atmosphere venting from dozens of breaches. On the command station, Theron waited tensely. "Is it destroyed?" "Reactor is failing," reported his sensor officer. "But it's still intact. Should we continue firing?" "No. Let it die. I want to salvage what we can from the wreckage. There is much we could learn from this vessel." For several minutes, the Fury simply drifted. The Valorian fleet maintained their positions, weapons ready but no longer firing. They watched as the human ship's systems slowly went dark, one by one. Then, every communications channel in the system suddenly activated at once. From the dying ship, a broadcast began. It was not in human language. It was in universal standard, the trade language used by dozens of spacefaring species. The message was simple, clear, and addressed to all Valorian forces. "Attention Valorian Empire. This is automated message from Terran defense vessel Fury. Primary mission failed. Unable to eliminate hostile command center. Initiating secondary protocol. Information dissemination." Theron felt his blood run cold. "Cut that transmission. Jam all frequencies." But it was too late. The message was broadcasting on every frequency simultaneously. Using the kind of power output that suggested the Fury had diverted all remaining reactor power to its communications array. The human species abandoned this vessel and 6 others like it 800 standard cycles ago. "We left because we chose peaceful evacuation over military conflict. We built these ships during a period of desperation, but decided they were too dangerous to use." The broadcast continued. On planets throughout the Valorian Empire, on ships, on stations, everyone was hearing the message. Even the subjugated species in the conquered territories were receiving it. This vessel was designated Prototype Fury Prototype Designation 7. It was never meant for deployment. It was abandoned because humanity rejected the path of violence. On Valoria Prime, in her palace, the Empress listened to the broadcast with growing dread. She understood what was happening. This was not just a message. It was a warning to her empire and to every species listening. Current human civilization location, coordinates follow. The broadcast transmitted a set of spatial coordinates. They indicated a location 40,000 light-years from Valoria Prime, far beyond any explored territory. Humanity now numbers 43 billion individuals across 17 star systems. We have thrived in our new home. We have built a peaceful civilization. We do not seek conflict. Quote, there was a pause in the transmission. Then the message continued, and its tone seemed to carry a weight that made even the ancient Empress feel a chill. But we still have 6 more prototypes. They remain in storage, in hidden locations, maintained and upgraded. We kept them as a reminder of what we can become, if necessary. Across the Valorian fleet, officers exchanged worried glances. 6 more ships like the Fury ***. The single vessel had nearly destroyed their empire by itself. If the Valorian Empire, or any other hostile force, seeks to attack humanity in our new home, these vessels will be activated. They will not be abandoned. They will not be automated. They will have crews. They will have human commanders who understand mercy and restraint. The message paused again. The Times, Fury Times, was dying, its reactor moments from total collapse, but it had enough power for one final statement. And that is what should terrify you. Humans who built this ship did so out of fear and desperation. They built a weapon without conscience, without restraint, without mercy. And then they looked at what they had created and were horrified, so they abandoned it. If you force us to use the other 6, they will be operated by humans who remember why we abandoned the Fury. They will fight with the full knowledge of what violence means. They will choose when to show mercy and when to show none. This vessel could not make those choices. It killed everything labeled as hostile. It could not negotiate, could not surrender, could not show compassion. The other 6 can, and that makes them far more dangerous. On his command station, Theron listened to the message and finally understood. The Times, Fury Times, had not been humanity's most terrifying weapon. It had been their warning, a demonstration of what they could build, but chose not to use. And the message was clear. If pushed, they would build worse. This is humanity's only warning to the Valorian Empire, and all who hear this message. The Sol system is declared forbidden territory. Any military vessels entering that space will be considered an act of war against the human species. If war comes, we will not send automated ships. We will come ourselves, and we will bring the other 6 prototypes with us. And 800 years of regret for leaving them unused. We do not seek conflict. We offer this final chance for peace. Humanity judges you not by your past actions, but by your future choices. Choose wisely. End transmission. The broadcast ended. And a moment later, the Times Fury's Times reactor finally breached containment. The ship exploded in a flash of light that briefly outshone Valoria Prime's sun. The explosion consumed everything within 100 kilometers. Several Valorian ships that had moved too close were vaporized instantly. When the light faded, there was nothing left of the Times, Fury Times, but expanding debris. The ship had destroyed itself completely, ensuring that no technology could be salvaged. No secrets recovered. No way to prepare for the next time. In the Imperial Palace, the Empress sat in silence for a long time. Around her, the council members argued about appropriate responses. Some wanted revenge. Others urged caution. Still others suggested trying to find humanity's new location and striking before they could prepare. Finally, the Empress raised her hand. The chamber fell silent. The Sol system will be declared forbidden territory, she said quietly. No Valorian ship will enter that space. No exploration. No salvage operations. Nothing. But Empress, one council member protested, we cannot let this insult. Silence. Her voice cut through the protest like a blade. I am 317 years old. I have ruled this empire for 283 of those years. I have seen wars, conquests, victories, and defeats. And I know when we have encountered something we cannot overcome. She stood from her throne, her old body still radiating authority. The humans did not send their most dangerous weapons against us. They sent an abandoned prototype that they were afraid to use, and it nearly destroyed us. What do you think they will send if we attack their new home? Ships with crews. Ships with commanders who can think, adapt, and choose when to show mercy. She looked around the chamber. We fear this automated ship because it showed no mercy. But the humans fear the same thing. That is why they abandoned it. And if they send ships with crews, we will face enemies who know exactly how much mercy to show and when to show none at all. The Empress walked to the window and looked out at her world. 800 years ago, humanity chose to flee rather than fight. They chose evacuation over invasion. They chose peace over war. But they built weapons like the Times Fury Times first, just in case. And they were wise enough to be afraid of their own creations. She turned back to the council. We will add humanity to the list of species that must never be provoked. The Sol system is now sacred territory, forbidden to all Valorian ships, and if any of our explorers ever encounter humanity in their new home, they are ordered to offer peaceful contact and nothing more. Is that truly necessary? Asked Grand Admiral Theron. The Empress fixed him with a hard stare. You saw what one abandoned prototype did to our fleet. Tell me, Admiral, do you want to face 6 more? With human crews? With 800 years of technological advancement? With commanders who know exactly what they're doing? Theron remembered watching the Fury Times weaponize a neutron star. He remembered the casualty reports, the destroyed ships, the fear in his warriors' eyes. And he thought about facing more of those ships, but with human intelligence guiding them. No, Empress, he said quietly. I do not. Then it is decided. Humanity is left alone, forever. The message from the Fury Times spread throughout the galaxy. Every species that had any contact with the Valorian Empire heard it. They learned that the massive empire, the conquerors of 47 systems, had been nearly destroyed by a single automated ship, and that ship was just a prototype that its creators had abandoned because they feared it. The subjugated species took note. Some began planning rebellions, emboldened by the Empire's demonstrated vulnerability. Others simply marked the Sol system on their star charts and added warnings. Forbidden. Humanity. Do not approach. And far away, 40,000 light-years from Sol, in a cluster of 17 star systems, humanity continued their peaceful existence. They had built new cities, new civilizations, new hopes. Most of them had never known about the Fury Times or the other prototypes. It was classified information, known only to the highest levels of government and military command. But in a secured facility on the capital world, 6 more ships waited in darkness. Ships that had been maintained, upgraded, and kept ready for 800 years. Ships that would never be used unless humanity had no other choice. The workers who maintained those ships were told stories. Stories about why the prototypes existed. Stories about the desperation era, when humanity had to choose between peace and violence. Stories about why they chose peace but kept the weapons anyway. And sometimes, in the quiet moments, those workers would look at the sleeping warships and feel grateful that humanity had never needed to wake them up. Because unlike the Fury asterisk, these ships would have crews, and those crews would have to live with whatever they did in humanity's name. The Fury Times had fought without conscience because it had no conscience to burden it. It was a pure weapon, untroubled by moral questions or the weight of its actions. The other 6 were different. They would be operated by humans who understood what war meant, who understood the cost of violence, who would remember every ship they destroyed and every life they ended. And that understanding, that burden of conscience combined with the capability for devastating violence, was what made humanity's warning so terrifying to those who heard it. The galaxy learned a lesson from the Fury asterisk. That humanity could build weapons of terrible power. But more importantly, they learned that humans were wise enough to fear their own creations, disciplined enough to choose peace even when they had the power for war, and compassionate enough to offer warning before demonstrating their full capabilities. The Sol system remained abandoned for thousands of years afterward. The ruins of Earth, Mars, and humanity's old colonies became a kind of galactic monument, a reminder of the species that had left rather than fight, the species that had built something terrible and then had the wisdom to walk away from it. And somewhere in the dark between stars, in hidden locations known only to a few, 6 more ships waited patiently, updated, maintained, ready, hoping to never be needed, because humanity had learned something important during the desperation era, that the most powerful weapon was not the one you used, but the one you chose not to use, and the greatest victory was the one that never required a battle. The Fury Times was gone, but its message remained. a warning, a promise, and a hope that wisdom would prevail over violence. For humanity had built monsters, but they had also built the compassion to keep those monsters chained. And in the end, that made them more dangerous than any weapon they could ever create. The galaxy never forgot, and humanity never stopped hoping they would never need to remind them.